hoping for.
Mr.
The last
Anderson?
18 months.
Here.
Mr. Fielmetzger? Mr. Gifford?
Here.
Mr. Jessic? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroe?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
And Mr. Meyer is not present.
Okay, approval of the minutes. It's been a while.
Well, I read them over the internet, and they seem to jive with my memory, so I'm going to move that we accept them as written.
I second that.
Okay, it's been called. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then we got a 2A, 14/5/24 minutes of June 17th. We didn't approve that one. You remember? 2A. Is that the same one?
Carl's here.
The minutes of June 17th, that's
Yeah,
what
we
you
were
just,
okay.
you just, yeah,
At the intersection of
that's what you just
We're gonna
moved
have to do it again, do
to
we?
approve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Staff report.
copies of the staff reports.
That's just the
That's
staff
the same
report
one?
asking you,
Okay.
yeah, for the motion.
Okay, agenda analysis.
No additions? No additions.
What's his name?
Do we have a quorum? Oh, we do.
Can't remember your name. Edgar. He wants to be
Good old, what's his name?
put on the, but you, is this the thing you filled out too? Or is this?
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll put it on the agenda here,
You're gonna put it on the agenda?
Well, it's public comment.
Public comment.
in public comments, okay? Now we're in citizen comments, so I guess we'll put you're in, so.
Martin, why don't you pull one of those chairs out of the way? You're okay.
Some assembly required.
Yes.
That looks like my golf club, Paul.
You only have one?
Yeah, that's all it'll let me have.
Or possibly to talk to an MGB.
See from where you're sitting?
Thank you. I'm Paul Edgar, Oregon City, Kanema. Kanema, this is the original territorial platting of Kanema from 1865, and it was flat platted. Hills, canyons, Coffee Creek, and everything on a steep slope. Nothing was considered. They just flat platted the whole thing. And it's got 60-foot wide right-of-ways, 12-foot wide alleyways, and in the long haul, maybe 80% of it is unimproved road. Because only 22 feet is asphalted, even though there's a 60-foot right-of-way, and it's a National Register Historic District. It has no curbs, it has no sidewalks, and people are in the street. It goes up and down like this, and anybody that's gone through it realizes you have very limited visibility. We have a corner like at 4th and Miller, where people come down, up and down, come down into it, no stop signs, no one can see from one side to the other, and we're trying to think that people can go 50, 25 miles an hour in it, residential speed. Why I'm here is I have talked with John for a long time. We've talked about this, tried to advance this, is to look at the safety, the public safety issues of Kanema. And in fact, if we can, reduce the speed limits in Kanema to 20 miles an hour and post it. When John put a sign out virtually in front of my house on 5th Avenue, it had a dramatic effect upon flashing radar detection and everything of causing people to see and understand how fast they were going. But we now have, we're the singular way to get to the Kenema Bluff, Metro Kenema Bluff. We have this great children's park, and it's becoming quite a nice attraction, positive for the city. But what it means is we have a lot of people coming and going, new infill, and it is the belief of many in our neighborhood, and I'm just one of them, that it's time for us to take a real serious look at public safety, and is 25 miles an hour an appropriate speed when we don't have any sidewalks or we just have narrow streets and we have all of this limited visibility? Should we be adding stop signs? Should we be posting it? What should we be doing that's right? And this is an appeal to you guys. And come to Kenema, take a look, put it on your agenda. Let's see if we can talk about it and see what is right. I'm not, saying that myself or many of the neighbors that have been in Kenema for a long time have all the answers. But what we'd love to do is have you take a look and have a real serious eyeball of it. Because if one child gets hit and hurt, that's one too many. And the kids the children's school bus drops them off down on 3rd Avenue, way down 3rd Avenue, and they have to wander all the way. A lot of the kids that live up on 5th Place, they go down to a set of stairs that goes up between 3rd and 4th. And then they wander through the street. People just can't see. People come out of these areas and they go flying through the neighborhood. We see it. In front of my house, I have a herd of deer. They go back and forth going through there. I don't want to see Bambi on the hood as a hood ornament. But that's going to be the case. We have cats and dogs getting killed. I hope you kill a few coyotes, but they are smarter. But we hope that you'll take a serious look. And you can see all of these little areas right here. These are unimproved, everything in the red. But it doesn't really reflect the fact that even though it's a 60-foot right-of-way, it's literally 22 feet of paved asphalt, which are just really historic wagon roads with a little asphalt on them. So hopefully you'll come down, hopefully you'll consider it. We'd like to see you, and I'd love to have you take people through a walkthrough, starting at 5th Avenue and South End Road, and walk through and look at the streets. John and I kind of laughed about it one time because right off of 5th Avenue, we have all of this stuff because of landslides. And the road looks like it was worse than a corn cob when you're coming through it. It's shifting around everywhere. Well, it slows people down. If you improved it, it'd make them go faster. Okay? So there's a little madness in some of this. I agreed with John when he kind of smiled at me. He says, yeah, it's slowing them down, isn't it? Yeah. But a lot of Kenema roads are just unbelievable. And you can't fully appreciate it until you get down there and look at it, walk through it, and see the visual. Coming down 5th Avenue, people are parking right by 5th and Miller, right on the side of the road. And the clearance from where a car parks there to get around it is about 11 feet. And then you go right into this Miller curve, blind curve. We have inadequate slow signs or curve signs. People just don't understand how the absolute lack of visibility is a major part of the factor. And I believe it's a common sense thing. We need to slow people down. Whatever we can do to slow them down, that's I think something that you guys need to take a look at, and I hope you come by. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, John?
I have a question. Excuse me, Mr. Edgar.
Yep.
You mentioned the National Historic District, and in the same breath that you were mentioning sidewalks, is there some preclusion to having sidewalks and curbs in a National Historic
Yes, there
District?
is. And if you take, I will send you the document from the National Historic Preservation League, which talks about the guidelines for infill and for alterations within a National Register district. Anything that detracts from the nature of why that district was registered and taken to through a national registry would alter its charm, you might say, its character of what it is.
Understood.
And so they really spell it out really
so
well.
you're really not petitioning that we consider putting sidewalks or curbs in the neighborhood?
It just spells out.
I mean, it can't be done?
It would take, that would go probably to Washington DC.
How about brush, berries, it's overgrown?
A lot of that's all really right in the right-of-ways too. But, so we have a
So
lot
the
of areas.
citizens should,
We have a lot of areas, and the city has been working to try to improve that. But blackberries, Himalayas, that type of stuff, and just everything it just creeps right down. And realize that they just notched out a little area in that 60 foot, so for the road surface, and so the rest of it is pretty wild.
Is a traffic control device, such as maybe a stop sign or a speed sign, is that exempt from the?
Oh, no.
So that could be something. That
Oh,
we could-
absolutely. We should be, any creative thing that can turn around and make our roads safer, reduce some speeds, would be welcome.
Well, you know, in my experience, it's always been the local that's breaking the laws.
Yes, we have, and how many times can you, when you're trying to take a leadership position in a neighborhood, go out there and try to slap your local neighbors on the wrist?
Yeah.
Okay, it's dangerous turf.
Yeah.
And when you get into the protection of this historic district, it creates lots of controversy, virtually anything you say and do. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A question for staff. So, a couple questions. Is there some flexibility there, some things that could actually be done if we did a walking tour and you kind of educated us, and then there may be some things that could happen if that's the case, and that's within our time frame and priorities? Maybe then we should plan to schedule that.
Yeah, I think there is. There's always opportunities for improvement. I think Paul's right. We spent a fair amount of energy based on the last time I think Paul came here. We did a lot of clearing of the public right-of-ways, so we've dealt with brush and some of these site distance areas that we had control over. We've done our part there, at least at the beginning of the summertime. But I think the biggest thing that I've heard from Paul is this idea of the city adopting or getting approved to put in these 20-mile-an-hour signs. And the larger cities have that ability in the state of Oregon to reduce speed signage from 25 miles an hour to 20. We don't fit in that category. So we're looking into whether or not that option exists for us. But Portland, for instance, has been given the authority to post lower speed limit signage in its cities. Whether they're enforcing it or not, I don't know. But that's one of Paul's biggest requests, I think, and probably has the most costs for us. Just be additional signage that we would have to replace the existing signage with. And then there's the question of enforcement. But
right,
I think
presuming you get the signage approved, then, right?
Right.
So that's a bureaucratic process with the state?
Yes. Which we haven't vetted completely. We're not sure exactly what that entails. We don't know of other local jurisdictions that are under 100,000 in population that have that authority to do. Portland has it because they're over 100,000, but that's the way the state law is written. So Martin and I have talked about it. We're going to look into that. I'm assuming he hasn't yet, but that's something that we want to look into. And then, but there are other things. The intersection of 4th and Miller is it has the geometry and the sight distance concerns, and probably the traffic that might warrant stop control at that location. We don't just put in stop signs anywhere, as you know. We're pretty careful about where we place our stop signs. They're not a traffic control device, right?
Is that right?
Stop signs are meant to manage traffic in unsafe conditions, not necessarily to slow traffic. But that particular location, in my view, may have the opportunity for a stop sign installation, and that would be something that we'd be willing to look at and consider with or without a walkthrough. But I think Paul's idea of a walkthrough, if this committee is willing to do that, the question is, how do we facilitate that, and what is that what the committee wants to do, and or do you want to do it individually, or I don't, that's up to you folks. We'll make it work, whatever you'd like to do.
John?
Well, I think that that'd be a very good exercise. Reducing the speed to 20 miles an hour, I question the effectiveness of that, because people are going to go the speed that they want to go. And it doesn't matter if there are signs up or not. I would think that maybe some traffic calming devices would be more effective. Has the neighborhood ever talked about speed humps?
Oh, yes, we have.
Okay.
Even everyone that hates them said that they would not turn them down. But however, they're not free.
They're not for
Have
Right.
you ever went
Yeah.
through Depot Bay?
And there's criteria for qualifying for speed humps that the geometries in
Yeah.
Kanema don't lend themselves for, so we'd have to be very careful as to locations that you choose to deploy those.
Well, I'm thinking that if we have a walkthrough, we need a little list from staff of the practical things that could be considered. Otherwise, we'll be all over the map. So there may be 10 things people would think of, but maybe only 5 of them are workable.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could have some focus when we do the walkthrough, and
Yeah.
you could put together a list. And
Even areas where people are parking, maybe we need to be looking at restricting some parking in some of these really tight areas, that have impacts. But this is where, honestly, just an open mind from everyone. Yeah, it's kind of like when I read the state document for allowing for reductions of speed to 20 miles an hour. It spelled out conditions and districts just like Kanema. So the way the legislation was written, it almost said Kanema right on it over any other consideration. So you looked at it and said, wow, if this is what they're talking about, maybe it's a fit. But let's not prejudge anything. Let you guys get a good idea of taking a look at what the conditions are, because we have, like on Ganong Street going down, it's at a 35% grade, and it goes straight down against a deal. And then the same thing is, another one coming off of 5th Place, it comes down right onto 4th. It's at another 35% grade. Some of these are really steep, very steep areas. And so
Do
they.
you have any neighbors that maybe would provide golf carts for us?
so, if you would, I'll try a motion here.
I have a question that I'd like to. Is there any accident history up there that we could have?
We'd have to look into that. I don't have that readily available here. We'll have to request it from the police department.
My memory of 4th and Miller is that I think 2 or 3 of the warrants could be met for an all-way stop at that point.
I think so too. We did it, if you remember, we did a 3-way stop at McCord and Pease Road. This committee kind of gave its a nod of approval for that. Wasn't necessarily the traffic counts,
Right.
but it was the geometry of that intersection.
The site clearance aside.
Yeah, and the site clearance. And I think at 4th and Miller, there is a stop on one leg.
coming
but not-
from the park.
No, it's actually coming as you come down the hill on Miller Street to the 4th, and 4th is a throughway. So an all-way stop would be could be helpful for some of the things that Paul's talking about. That's also the place where we've had sight distance problems, right, Paul? Right on the corner there.
Absolutely. There's no stop sign on any of the 3 corners there.
There is
There
one
is.
stop sign on Miller as you come to the
Photograph of
intersection.
it right here.
You have a phone?
It's right here.
Wow, I see people going right through it all the time.
Well, that's the problem, Paul, with
That's the problem
placing
with too many, yeah.
with placing stop signs in
Well,
places where they're not warranted.
Yeah, but it's you know, when I retired, I started taking upper
So,
division classes in
just-
transportation, and I sat for 3 years in the Clackamas County Transportation Advisory Council. And all I can say is in all of my classes and stuff, this is a beautiful place for a class study.
Well, I'd like to
One
try a
thing-
motion here then. Just as the conversation this evening is exposed, there's lots of ways people can look at the various issues there. So if we're going to make some kind of recommendation to staff later on, we need to be looking at the same thing with the same kind of factual information about traffic stop signs or whatever. So I would make a motion that we would have a walkthrough, but we have as a guide a list of the specific issues that you think we can potentially address with some pro and con, so that we're not all over the map when we go out there. I mean, if you want to amend it once we get there and add 1 or 2 items, that's one thing, but have something
Right.
concrete, so we're just not shooting from the hip.
Yeah,
And if
for
you have
instance,
some
we know
stu-
we know sidewalks. I believe sidewalks and curbs based on the one curb that's in the neighborhood and kind of how we dealt with that. It's not going to happen for that neighborhood. So, and I think it's a wrong solution there. But you know, the mile per hour signage, we can share with you those concerns. But we do have some tools. I mean, the curve ahead signage that has the rider that lists, you know, that those kind of things can happen. I mean, if there's trimming, if there's places that should be posted no parking, we can work through those issues as well. So
I'd like to second that motion, but I'd like to follow up with a comment that I think that there's a lot of things going on here on the boundaries of this Kanema neighborhood, which is a classic in the state of Oregon, really. The Blue Heron site's going to be developed ultimately, and with the metro and its open space to the south and the park, I think this would just be just a real good pilot project for the city to take on a neighborhood that is so delicate, to see what we could do, what we're capable of as a committee and as a city to make these streets safe. And I think this would really be a good exercise for this committee and for the city to see what really is possible. Because there might be some funding out here for this, you know, and it's restricted by what you can do, but yet it's an opportunity to really address some issues that Paul's expressed. So I think that would be an exciting undertaking for this committee. I really do. So I'll second that. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I just want to state one thing, and Henry alluded to this earlier, okay, that one of the intersections potentially met the warrants for a three-way signalization. When we go through, and I'll prepare a list of what's viable, and I'll tell you, you know, this meets this criteria, meets that criteria, doesn't meet this criteria. And these ladies who are sitting here will tell you in just a minute, we take a look at those warrants and we do an analysis, and all we do is rely on the facts. And if the numbers point that this doesn't warrant signalization or it doesn't warrant additional signage, that's what the report's going to state. It's not going to be my preference or Paul's preference. It's what warrants are met for those potential locations.
That's understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Durkee?
Good evening. My name is Brandy Durkee, and I live in Oregon City. I'm here requesting that a crosswalk be put in, or be considered to be put in, at the somewhat of an intersection connecting Rose Road to Rose Road across South End Road. I've got lots. I live in the Don Meadows development, and we've got lots of families that are going from our little community to across South End Road to John McLaughlin Elementary, to the park, and to the neighborhoods across the way. And there's lots of There's lots of traffic right through there, and we often have cars stop for us to cross. But I personally, I have a 1.5-year-old, so I don't have a child that goes to John McLaughlin, but he will eventually. And I have lots of friends in the neighborhood that do have children that go to John McLaughlin, and I'm thinking that that's going to be kind of an issue here pretty soon, if not already.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Isn't there a new park going in near that location?
I do not know. A new park?
Yeah, it's a new city park being worked on, Filbert Run.
Yes.
No, that's a different location.
It's not near there,
Well, I mean,
relatively speaking.
It's in the same city.
it's in the city.
Yeah, well,
Quite a ways from there.
okay.
Not
That's
in that
fine.
area, I guess. So, I'm just here to request that crosswalk be put in. The only thing I'm thinking there might be a little bit of an issue is that on one side of, and excuse me for not having the directions, but
This is up on the screen. So
okay,
Rose Road is, is it on there?
Right where the arrow is.
Yeah.
right where the arrow is, yep, connecting
And there is a crosswalk at McLaughlin, right?
further down. Yeah, there's no sidewalk on South End Road, so if somebody were to stay on South End and walk down to that crosswalk, there would be it wouldn't be very safe, in my opinion. I wouldn't want to walk my child that way.
So just maybe let me talk through this a little bit just so it's clear what I live
How did you
on
bring that
on
up?
McLaughlin School
Okay.
site
Just this?
regularly. So this new development along Rose Road here has
Mhm.
sidewalks around the development, and there's also a pathway that leads along this fence line here and kind of ends right here. We've heard requests at Partlow as well for crosswalk at
Okay.
Partlow, and the other existing crosswalk is at South End, so John McLaughlin School, and there's limited sidewalks for most of these, with the exception of this area right here where there's some development activity, and of course I just mentioned the other development along Rose Road. But we've got gaps on what would be the west side of the road between Rose Road and this development right here, and between the school and this development along this end of Rose Road, and then we've got another gap kind of along really from Partlow Road down to Rose Road. So there's the problem that we have with South End, which I think we've made some improvement with the new striping out there. I don't know how many of you have traveled South End Road, but we striped that a little bit narrower, one to help slow traffic, and the other is to provide a little more bike lane, or where we don't have a sidewalk, maybe pedestrian walking area. So that's helped.
Isn't there some ditches out there too that are pretty deep?
There's deep ditches along much of this area in South End. And so, the school-aged children that would be attending John McLaughlin, just walking South End in itself is not something I would let my child do either, right?
Yeah.
Not without a parent. So, I think getting them across the road is a nice thing to have. There is a pretty big question in my mind about where they go then. And in just about any instance coming from the Rose Road area or that new planned development, we can't even really get them to the corner. We can't safely get them to the corner of Rose Road. That's the only piece of sidewalk.
Yeah, right there on
But
that
there's
kind
no
of
sidewalk
diagonal.
here,
Yeah.
and there's no sidewalk here, so it's kind of like, getting
Where?
them across is a challenge. And then, the study that we saw at Partlow, there was, because of the speed of South End Road at 35 miles an hour, there were some real questions about how to do that safely. And, if we're going to stripe a crosswalk, which we've done in some locations. You guys just approved one at Myers Road, but in those areas we had sidewalks, and it was pretty nice transition from a sidewalk on one side of Myers Road to a sidewalk on the other side of Myers Road. And good sidewalk connectivity on both sides of that road. It made a lot of sense. So I'm just saying, we do have some past information. We didn't include it in this. We can share that with you for your next packet, based on the study that was done at Partlow. I think again, it, you know, might warrant a visit, not a coordinated visit, but I think if you're not familiar with that area, just to see. Unfortunately, we need more sidewalk connectivity along South End Road,
Mr. Chair.
and that's not a.
A lot of pedestrian traffic, a lot of people running and walking their dogs, and
Yeah.
so that
Mr.
would be
Chair.
nice.
She would have to cross South End Road to get to Filbert Run Park.
That is true. That is true.
Where's that?
Filbert Run Park, just so I can, let me zoom out a little bit. I gotta go one more.
It's
Filbert Run Park is right here, and this is John McLaughlin, so it's, and this is Rose Road. So it's, you're right, it's near but not.
If you were walking to Filbert Run Park from the other side, you would have to cross South End Road to get to it.
That's correct. So,
A lot of us used to use South End Road. Shortcut to Canby, but
Oh, yeah.
got the speed limits down now that would come through
Yeah.
Kenema.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Are those pink lines, or is that the city limits, or?
Yep. It's either the city limits or the urban growth boundary.
So-
It'd be like a diagonal crosswalk. No, not considered.
and we don't, sometimes you see those in downtown areas, but you don't see it in something like that.
Okay.
So I have a quick question. I don't know if it's the proper title, but the Safe School Act. So I know that Holcomb neighborhood had a grant and got a good portion of their problem that was similar to this with sidewalks on one side. Is that a tool that's available for addressing this overall issue? It's got lots of
Safe routes to school.
incomplete pieces there with no sidewalk.
You know, I think Safe Routes to School could have some advantages there. You know, that's a pretty long stretch from Rose Road, but I've always felt like from Filbert Drive to the school, wouldn't it be great to have that little piece connected, at least, you know, it's one property basically, and it would provide some help to get pedestrians around the corner. The challenge with South End is that it's going to be someday much more than it is today.
Meaning wider and carry more traffic.
Wider, yeah, it's probably going to be a 3-lane section, and there's several intersection improvements. That doesn't mean that we can't make smaller, short-term improvements, but I think that, so there is that one piece. The other is we've got these open ditches, so it's not like you can just, you know, add some shoulder to the road without filling in those ditches. So then it becomes more of a stormwater project or more of a utility project, and it just kind of snowballs into a much bigger project. And you know, the issue is we really want to get across the street in a safe way, and to a location that's a safe way. So one option could be, you know, first, you know, maybe working with this property owner or this property owner. So this street is like a half street improvement. Maybe, you know, trying to get these property owners to dedicate the right of way so you can put in a curb extension or a curb, you know, landing for a ADA ramp is not easy to do. And that, you know, I'm just saying, look, can we get to here at least? Would that help? And it would, because it could put them, you know, in the back door of John McLaughlin instead of the front door. So there is those kind of things, and Safe Routes to School might help with that.
Is there any other way into McLaughlin through this housing development back here?
Yeah, it's again off the screen here a little bit, but
Excuse me, John, apparently your mic isn't picking up.
sorry. So yeah, there is this back entrance here that comes onto a pathway that takes you into the school. Not a driving path, but a walking path. So I guess my suggestion is we provide you that report that was done for the other intersection of South End. If you want to, we make an agenda item. If you want to visit it,
Sure.
more on a one-on-one instead of a group, that's fine. And just kind of get a sense, if you don't already know, what some of the problems are associated with that. But I live it, I walk it. I'd love to see more pedestrian opportunities there for sure. And I do hope that the striping, I think Martin and his crew worked with the county to kind of narrow those lanes just a little bit to provide a little more bike lane, which.
I didn't know they were narrow.
Well, if you remember, they also, before we chip sealed it, they had 2 lines that really looked kind of funky. So we kind of matched the narrowest of those 2 lines.
We gained almost a foot on each side.
So at this point, where do we go from here? Are we going to recommend that we recommend a crosswalk, or are we going to go out and investigate it? Or
Let us present the report. We have an existing report
Okay.
for that vicinity. Let us present that report to you at the next month's TAC. We can make it an agenda item. You and any of your neighbors are welcome to attend. The agenda is published a few days before the actual meeting, so you can go to the city's website and you can pull the report down from there. You'll have an opportunity to take a look at it. They did take a look at 3 locations within that corridor and gave us some recommendations as to some crosswalk alternatives and a prioritized list of, if you can't do this, then potentially do this or this. So we'll take a look at that again, present it to you guys, present it to the neighborhood, and then from there I think we could probably take an informed decision.
Who is they? Who's provided the report to you?
Who's
It was
the
DKS. Carl, in the back of the room.
Oh, okay. How did he know this was coming?
Yeah.
Woke them up.
Carl's here for a different interview.
I mean, the one thing that a Safe Routes could fund, which I think was a recommendation, was pedestrian activated flashing beacon, and it'd be different than what we have at South End, but similar, and do the similar, something similar. It wouldn't provide a red light, but it would provide a amber, to let vehicles know that you got a pedestrian out there.
like what got put in over at the library?
Yes.
Exactly. But it's my recollection. It's not at Rose. It's at a different location. Is their recommendation for that? But it's in that vicinity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anton.
As a little aside, I got on yesterday evening and just Googled successful traffic calming techniques in residential areas and really pulled up a huge body of research that's being used in this country as well as Canada and Europe. And one of the things that wasn't mentioned, I'm kind of surprised, is that was one of the most successful traffic calming techniques is to make some streets one-way and combine that with an extended neck on a curb. And along with traffic circles that wouldn't work in the Kenema district, but still, that was one of the most successful things. Another thing the research says is that stop signs don't work. I'm Francesca Antone. Thanks for hearing me. I've lived at off and on. I've lived at 123 High Street, so I'm on the promenade side at 2nd and High. I own my home. And I want to thank you for your volunteership. I have served on volunteer projects for many, many years, and I know how much work it is. And you especially have a great challenge. I realize your 2 primary challenges are to listen to your city staff and leaders, and to also listen to your community. And so that's why I'm here, get you all at one point. I realize there are many traffic concerns in Oregon City, and they are increasing every year. The governments, in general, are notoriously behind the 8 ball when it comes to anticipating how the increase in population and business stresses budgetary issues of urban life. Many are still operating under the myth that more development is going to fix budgetary issues. But even despite an incredible amount of a credible body of good research that completely dispels this kind of thinking. And I think just in the last few minutes, we've heard the real cost of development that comes, right? So I don't believe there's a person in this town who would disagree with the fact that our traffic is getting more unpleasant and difficult to manage. despite all of our city planning to make Oregon City a more livable place. There are two key aspects of the McLaughlin neighborhood that I would like to talk about this evening. One, we are at the bottom of a funnel of traffic coming from every direction. 7th Street, High Street, Washington Street, Center Street, 5th Street, Malala Avenue are just a few of the streets that are experiencing more traffic, and many people still live on these streets in homes that are generally not set back from the streets because when they were built, the streets were much more narrow. So we experience this increased traffic as more of an intense intrusion into our private life at home. Our windows rattle, our old houses shake, and we don't feel very comfortable. The other important aspect to us is the nature of our neighborhood. At every important entrance into our neighborhood, you see the little sign that says, "You're entering the historic McLaughlin neighborhood," etc. In fact, our neighborhood is part of the jewel of this city. People come from all over to walk around our houses, visit the museums, visit the library, do their business with City Hall, and visit our cute shops. I would submit to you that these two considerations are key to your thoughts and planning to keep this neighborhood a jewel that benefits the entire city. It takes a certain kind of person to purchase a home in the McLaughlin neighborhood. There aren't really any other neighborhoods in Oregon City like it. While we have more than our desired share of slum landlords, there are still many individuals who love the neighborhood and want to keep it beautiful and comfortable. We would never consider our homes a profit-making enterprise here. It just doesn't happen. Thankfully, I've noticed since I came back from working in Canada last year that there are more and more new, young, upwardly mobile couples, many with young children, who are choosing the McLaughlin neighborhood to raise their families. And I think this is wonderful. It's terrific to see these people coming in, and it's vital to keeping the McLaughlin neighborhood, keeping the integrity of the neighborhood. They are especially concerned. I'm on the steering committee for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and they come and express their increased concern about the traffic, and I would hope that you on the commission, I think that you would be well served to find a way to talk to these people and to hear what they have to say about their concerns for safety for their families, comfort, and the space that their children need. I want to emphasize that those of us who live in our homes that we own, we don't mind not making a lot of money when we sell them, but we really don't want to lose what little equity we have as a result of runaway traffic in the McLaughlin neighborhood. We really don't want people who might want to come and buy our homes to say, boy, the traffic is out of control here. Despite what the city staff might determine with their labels for our streets and their methods of tracking traffic and speeds, there isn't a single person who lives here who won't tell you they are experiencing more cars, faster speeds, and more noise in our residential neighborhood here. I sincerely hope that in the near future, you, the commission, will dedicate yourselves to adding a working little sign under the one that says entering the historic McLaughlin neighborhood that says a traffic calmed neighborhood. I think it can be done. I think that the city as a whole needs to respect the nature of our neighborhood. We need to do it without reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of great research out there, and all of you are capable of doing the work to find out what it is and what works. We need a lasting and sustainable impact on keeping this neighborhood a desirable place to live. We don't want to go the way of so many inner urban areas. They die while the suburbs grow. And they become so depleted that it becomes impossible to restore them again without a huge amount of resource that fewer and fewer urban areas are able to cough up. So I want to thank you, and I really hope that this committee, I think there's lots and lots of changes coming ahead from Oregon City. Some of them seem positive to me, some of them seem really scary. So I think it's going to take a lot of wisdom and guts, bravery, creativity, a lot of research to find out how we can keep people comfortably in their homes here. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, you're up.
Hi, I'm Louisa Ganyu. I spoke before this committee in June, and I want to thank Martin for the report.
No problem.
Thank
Sorry
you.
for the delay.
That's okay. I'm still concerned about the traffic, and Mr. Mahoney, I loved your idea of making a model out of a particular part of a town. And if there's not one place that should be done, or shouldn't be done, should be done, it's the McLaughlin Historic District. I'm still concerned about traffic. I noticed that some of the data is, and the report is from 2011, and I'm just wondering when.
It's actually on our work plan for this summer, and I'm actually reading an
Not
email.
this summer.
Or next year. I'm
This-
actually reading an email. We're going to meet Friday with our project manager for getting those updated.
I looked through this information, and it just doesn't seem to apply to Center Street. I know that, and I was surprised also to learn that there are control boxes on Center Street, 4 of them. Is that what they're called? Or
Not sure what information you're talking about.
Oh, that's where we, those are temporary. When we do the counts, on those days we do the counts, that's where that data is recorded.
There's no physical station there. That's where they took the data at that
I
point
see.
in time.
Okay. It doesn't match up with when I'm sitting on my front porch. It doesn't match up with what I see sitting on my front porch. And I invite any of you to come and sit on my front porch and have a conversation while cars are speeding by. You can't. You have to stop talking and wait until the car or truck is by. And this, to me, is not a residential historic district. It could be a wonderful, calm, quiet area if steps were taken to calm the traffic. And so I learned that stop signs aren't applicable and speed humps aren't. But I'm wondering about signage. I'm wondering the painted lines. Can something be done? There are 2 yellow lines down Center Street. It's like a freeway, so cars are zipping back and forth. I don't know whether the yellow lines make people think that they can drive whatever speed they want, but people drive whatever speed they want. So I would implore you to come to Center Street and sit for a while, especially in the morning and in the evening when people are on their way to work. I was going to say more and I can't remember, so.
Well, thank you for.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Because, I just think more attention needs to be paid to what can be done in our neighborhood to make it a more pleasant place to live. And, have people adhere to a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Respond. We are at the threshold of a paradigm shift for Oregon City. For years and years and years and years since I've grown up this place, when's something going to happen in Oregon City? Well, it's not necessarily happening in Oregon City. It's happening all around us. In Canby, in Molalla, in Estacada, which by the way is on fire right now, but they'll pull through it. The heroes of this whole thing are sitting to my left right here. I sit on the planning commission, and we're scratching our head too. We're open for business. We believe in free enterprise and property rights and things of that nature without choking the gift horse to death. and let things happen without over-regulating everything and scaring business away and things of this nature. But in the process, you're bringing people into the community. And wherever you bring people, you're going to bring their cars because we have a love affair with cars. And it's a dilemma. It really is. I mean, we're believe it or not, the Portland International Airport is going to be one of our biggest sources of traffic. People are going to come to that Blue Heron Legacy site from international points of origin that come here. And in the process, where do you put the cars? And this is where, I don't have a magic wand. I don't think anybody here has a magic wand. If we had hundreds of millions of dollars, we might be able to solve the problem of traffic. I mean, it's going to take that kind of money to do it.
Well, take a look at the 213 bypass. It took years before they put it in. Just think of the traffic we used to have going up the hill.
Exactly. And if it weren't for 213, they'd be going up 7th Street. When I was a kid, it took us an hour to get from the tunnel to the library, going down Main Street. And but we're really at that point right now where Oregon City is just going to explode.
That reminded me of one of the remarks I was going to make, and that is when Blue Heron is developed and when the library expansion takes place, there's going to be more traffic in this area. And it would be so great if when people came into this city, into our neighborhood, they understood that it's a traffic calmed area and they can't zip through. When I was downtown on Saturday with the car show, I was going across the bridge and there was a sign at the bottom of the elevator that said more parking, additional parking on High Street. That's inviting outsiders into the McLaughlin Historic District. And they need to know that they can't speed down the street, even though the residents do. But there must be something that can be done to calm people down. I'm going to get out there with a sign. I have a new hand sign. And people scratch their heads trying, it's 2.5. The speed limit is 2.5. Not 35 or 45.
Before you get up, just for the committee members, we've got the report that we prepared for you, and we've got that as a copy for each of them. And Lisa, if you want to distribute that to the committee members. We did take a look at this. Okay, all the requests that come through here, we give them an in-depth analysis, and we try and do what we can. So based on the warrants that we have for stop signs, it didn't meet those criteria. When, I understand where you're coming from, quality of life issue, but I have to have some guidelines that we follow. Otherwise, it's Thunderdome. So that was applied, and it didn't meet those. Then we took a look at the speeding issues and everything that we've got from the data that I have, and yes, it's 3 years old. When we get the data refreshed, we'll take a look at it again. Okay, we'll make that commitment, so when we've got fresh information, we'll reevaluate it and see has anything changed. But we did put some recommendations in the back of that report for some things that we can do. I did have a conversation with the police department today. And you've met Brian Willard, our traffic enforcement officer. He couldn't come here tonight. We'd asked him to come. And he has issued some additional citations. We've got commitments from the PD to try and help with the enforcement issue. We're looking at what we can do in terms of some additional signage out there, so I don't have to have you standing out in the street and hand gestures, gang signs, and we got a drive-by issue that the PD gets involved in.
Could you define that hand gesture?
Let's not.
2.5.
Yeah. So we're taking a look at what we can do. So I do have some avenues within this fiscal year that we are looking at, but they're not something that I can do on a permanent basis. We're looking at some alternatives, and as we get further into it, we'll present it to the TAC, and I'll have Lisa knock on your door and give you an update when we've got some further information to pass down. Okay? So we're doing the best we can with what we have. All right.
One of the things that we're trying to do here is to get this committee talking with the Planning Commission. I sit with the Planning Commission, and my reason for doing that was to get some dialogue going between these because whatever the planning commission does in terms of land use is going to affect traffic, which these people here are going to have to consider. And you'd be surprised what goes on in trying to mitigate these traffic problems at the staff level. Public just doesn't have any awareness of how hard these people try to approach that on a limited budget, limited resources, and it's really this community is one of the best communities I've ever been associated with in terms of having to solve these problems, and some of them, frankly, are not solvable. They really are.
Steve, can I say something real quick before we move on? Because I know Carl's here, and but I wanted to say this to all the people who spoke tonight, because I think it applies to all. Speeding traffic. I live in an Oregon City neighborhood myself. You're pretty much aware of the traffic, especially when you're sitting on your front porch. It's. I think though that people don't recognize the speed at which they see people driving. We have heard from a lot of people in Kenema. Paul can speak to this. I believe his street is the straightest street and the street where you're most likely to get speed, right, Paul? That's the one street in the neighborhood that's going to most likely have a speeding car because it's long and it's straight. You can kind of see where you're going. Our traffic data showed that the traffic on average was doing a little over 15 miles an hour on that, on average. Now, there were some that would try to break the speed record, I'm sure, when given the right vehicle but for the most part, the traffic in that neighborhood is moving well below the speed limit. Okay, but it seems very fast. It seems very fast to people, and that's where I think people get. When they're sitting on their front porches, they're distracted by the noise, because the noise is an issue. And on High Street and on Center Street, let's face it, that's not the smoothest pavement in the world either. Just like on Fifth Street, it's the history of that area is it's an old lake bed, right? So we've got soil problems, and I drive High Street and Center Street regularly, and I just know that noise-wise, it's an irregular street. So. We're trying to balance solutions with the existing conditions, and you're right, the traffic isn't going to. We don't have any projections for traffic going down in Oregon City. So,
thank you for listening,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I got a question for staff. The question is, could we have something like sidewalk bump outs on collector and arterial streets in residential neighborhoods under the way the current code is written? And would it be practical to put that in as not as a current thing, but as something to be included in an upcoming transportation plan or something?
We do have curb extensions on 7th and Malala. So I would say curb extensions on collectors and arterials is not prohibited.
And that would tend to calm them down a little bit, in the sense that every time you come to an intersection, you come to a gate.
Possibly. I wouldn't, there's...
I know
the other little problem we have, if we're talking specific to High and Center Street, is we've got some drainage challenges down there too. So anytime you add a curb extension, there's other things to think about. I'll just say that. But I think curb extensions are effective. And, they can be installed in locations like High and Center. I'm trying to think I don't think we have any now, but.
But I also know they're expensive, so I would not expect them to be in the near future, but incorporate into an improvement project or something.
I tried turning on a curb intersection with a 21-foot truck pickup.
Yeah, I know.
And you're in the other lane.
Don't drive into town.
I was a project manager on putting those things on Main Street.
And then you drive over the curb
so
extension.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Thanks. One more.
Thank you.
Connor.
Oh.
Last one on the list here.
Good evening. My name is Michaela Connor. I too live on Center Street, and I first want to thank you all for being here. I feel that everybody that is speaking is truly being heard. Very important to me, as I was reluctant to come. I didn't want to be frustrated by the process, and I appreciate your time. I will echo what both of these ladies said. You are welcome to come sit on my front porch. It's not pleasant. We call people driving by bobbleheads because we do have that unsteady road. They drive so fast, their heads are bobbing, their trucks are waggling, and things are going all over the place. I'm concerned for all the children. I live right next, pretty much across the street from the Catholic school. A lot of children in our neighborhood, a lot of domestic animals. Matter of fact, just a couple of weekends ago over on High Street, right by the grocery store, I was sitting on the patio enjoying a cup of coffee, and I heard a horrible gut-wrenching scream. So I jumped up and I thought, well, I must go into action. So I ran around the corner, saw a woman laying on the street because her animal, she's holding the dog's leash, her animal had been run over. She was distraught. I didn't get close enough to know. I just was very upset to see it, and I don't know that the person stopped. It is, that area in there is like a freeway. It's very disturbing.
Where was this thing?
This was right by the
Third and
grocery
High.
store.
Third and High.
Right. So the High Street Market.
High Street Market.
Yeah. And that's directly around the corner from me. So, echoing what has been said, I will ask you, as a concerned citizen, what can I do to help? I, like Louisa, go out and do this. Tell people, bring it down. Slow down. I can't stand on the street all day long doing that either, but,
One of the things I found somewhat effective and illustrative is to obey the speed limit myself.
Yes.
You'd be surprised how many people I collect on my rear bumper.
Yes. It's true.
Really.
Well, the other thing I would say is, please don't speed through the Kenema neighborhood because usually the speeders leave their neighborhood or their street where they're really concerned about speeding in their neighborhood,
Right.
and then they go on about their trip and they forget about speeds and that, let's face it, there may be outsiders that come to town. I get that, but many of our speeders, we see it at schools. You
true,
get
I
into
agree.
school zones, and on the way to traffic, 90% of the speeders are moms getting their kids to school, and they're concerned about safety of their kids, just like the people that live on the street that they're speeding on. And so it is a camp. I think maybe we need to look at a public campaign to kind of get Oregon City residents to start believing in slowing down. So we can
Agreed.
work on that.
And I would also say to you, I think it's hypocritical for people to come to a meeting such as this and raise these concerns if I'm going to go speeding through anywhere else in town. I obey the laws. I want everybody else to obey the laws. I want to know what I can do to help, with the situation. So for now, I'll be out on Center Street doing this, hoping they understand what I mean. Bring it down. And then I again, thank you for all of your time and your energy put into this.
Thank you.
One comment with police officer I know, he's retired now. His watch commander told him to write everybody up. It's going 5 over on Claremont Way. And he caught a woman doing 35, getting her kid to school. And she led into him like, you can't do that. And he looked at her name. She was the head of the Claremont Association, Neighborhood Association. And she's been complaining people were going too fast, and she forgot.
You can check my driving record.
Haven't been caught yet.
Okay, let's move on. This is the end of the citizen comments. Traffic signal warrant report.
It's about traffic safety. You're free to stick around if you like. In McLaughlin.
Item number 5.
Yeah.
That's right. You're not doing it today?
Oh, the other thing is that there is going to be some openings on the board. You're free to join us.
Mm-hmm.
Just apply.
Mm-hmm.
Agenda item 5.
Thanks, Carl.
Agenda item 5.
For being patient.
Yeah. It came back down.
There was a new agenda item.
So, commission members, as you know, we've had the intersection of Washington and 12th on our radar for quite some time now. with the summer work that we've got currently going on, just prior to getting started on the work along Washington, we had asked Carl and his firm at DKS to take a look at a report they had prepared for us a few years ago for this intersection to verify whether that intersection now, based on new traffic information, met the requirements for becoming a signalized intersection. So we'd asked Carl to come and present that to you. Another update that during our recess that kind of made this presentation a little bit more timely is, if you recall, about 6 months ago in the spring, we had a gentleman who was struck while crossing this intersection and was subsequently killed from that incident. We had, during the recess, another incident where an individual was attempting to cross the street, trying to cross from the east side to the west side along Washington Street on the northern crossing, and was again struck by a vehicle. He was fortunate enough his injuries were relatively minor. So what we've asked Carl to do is he's going to present the key points from his analysis of that intersection, and then we're going to talk to you about some temporary alternatives that we're looking at to put in place until we're fully ready to implement an improvement project to signalize that intersection. So, Carl, if you could.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Carl Springer with DKS. Recognize several of you. You guys are diehards. Gotta say. So I think you have a copy of this document. It's a memo. It goes through the traditional traffic signal warrant evaluation. There's some very clear standards and guidelines about when you do and when you don't do traffic signals. And so this follows that process. And it's an update of an earlier work that we did at this same location. I think since that prior work, the connection down to McLaughlin was made at 12. So yeah, there's a fundamental change in the traffic pattern there. So what this memo tells you, it starts with a summary first and then it goes through the details. So I'll do the same, and feel free to ask me any questions you have. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but so the first answer is there warrants met today? And the answer is yes, there are. There is one warrant met today. There's a roster of a total of 9 warrants. So if you look at that table at the bottom of the first page, it shows up at the bottom and then it kind of rolls over to the top of the second page. So you're looking at a number of different things there. You're looking at traffic conditions through several hours of the day, what we call the 8-hour, the 4-hour, the peak hour warrants. Pedestrian only, school crossings, and then a number of other factors. The one that it meets today is the crash history. It meets that today. And there's more detail on the following pages that explains that whole process. But one of the other things you'll notice is we looked at 2 different conditions here. So we looked at the volume data that was collected in 2014, and then we looked at the volume data that was projected for the year 2035 through the TSP update that was just finished last summer. And so we then interpolated, which is a fancy way of saying we made an average of, we assumed the growth would be average across all those years. And frankly, what this tells me, if you look at the findings here for the first 2 warrants where it says 8-hour and 4-hour, when it says it's going to be met in 2015 and in 2017, it means it's essentially met today, but it's just under the needle, right? And if you're only talking about 1 or 2 or 3 years worth of growth, that's not very much growth. And so it's a good thing that the city's planning on that improvement. They've already got some improvements in the ground to make that construction simpler when it's done. Well, one thing you mentioned before I started was to get my directionality correct. So we, in this memo, right or wrong, we think Washington Street runs north-south.
Close enough.
Close enough.
So all the verbiage in here about east, west, north, south, that's what we're treating that as. And the most difficult approach there is that uphill approach on 12th, rounding the corner there, turning uphill on Washington. And I was happy to see that curb extension there is gone. I was out there today, and I'm like, oh, good, I'm glad that's gone, because it's just awkward geometry for a vehicle to make it around that and stay in the lane on the other side. So that was a good improvement. If you want to control speed, just leave the roadway the way it is now. I'm sure people will just ride at a nice, even speed.
Yeah, right.
Slow, going 10 miles an hour. And
Yeah.
a lot of these safety issues will just go away. So I don't know.
I do have a question about the
Token
warrants.
flagger.
I'm sorry.
I do have a question about the warrants.
Okay.
Is there a site clearance clause in any of the warrants?
Safe stopping sign one.
For,
That one.
for sideways vision, that is to say, how
corner
close to a vehicle.
intersection.
There's intersection sight distance. Is that what you're
Intersection
talking
site,
about?
yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I mean there was a study done prior to this one that looked at that same movement I'm talking about. Was you're coming up 12th and looking to your left downhill, the building, as you can see in the aerial and on your screens, I suppose, is right there in the corner, and it's right at the edge of safe stopping sight distance. In fact, that's partly why I think that was the rationale for putting the curb extension in the first place, is so a car could come just another couple feet up 12th and then see around the building a little bit better. That was the whole rationale for that, so they can see just, another 10 or 20 feet makes the difference, assuming vehicles are going the speed they're supposed to be going, right? So, it's a little bit tricky if they're speeding up the hill, because then that whole rule of thumb that we're using as engineers doesn't quite work as well, because they don't stop as fast, right?
I was
when they're
also
going
thinking
faster.
about the vertical curve
Oh.
between 12th and 13th.
Yeah, there's a hump in the road as you go down the hill, essentially.
North,
that
yeah.
You probably remember that, Carl.
Yeah, that's there, but I thought the obstruction was the building, not so much the vertical curve.
Well, there's shrubbery going, if you were going down the hill,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to see around. You got a short car.
Yeah, so basically what the memo says is that in the very short term, the next year or two or three, you're going to meet up to 4 of these warrants, and there's no rule that says you have to meet them all, right? So 4 is plenty. 4 means you can reasonably go out there and make a case that this is an appropriate location.
To whom?
I'm sorry?
Make a case to whom?
Whoever sues you for putting in a signal when you shouldn't have.
Who would do that?
Oh.
Who has standing?
Oh, it's a long list of people.
Turn on your television around 12:30.
So if we build signals or put signs when they're not warranted, let's say we put a stop sign in, because that's a little easier to justify. People are asking for stop signs. If we place them without warrants, and somebody gets rear-ended and recognizes, especially if there's a report that says it's not warranted, you take on the liability, or the city takes on the liability for that.
The fact of the matter is, signals solve many of safety problems. They don't solve them all. I mean, a signal will typically generate a certain new kind of crash that wasn't there before. There'll be rear-end crashes. Right. Because people don't pay attention, right, and they run up on a car and you get rear-end crashes. The net result, though, is overall safety is actually better because the severity and type of crashes change. So you don't have the T-bone crashes anymore. You don't have the right-angle crashes as much. So the consequences of the traffic control goes down, but you may have more fender bender type crashes, rear-end type crashes. So it isn't a perfect solution, but it's a step up the safety curve, I guess, is one way to put it.
As someone who's been through a couple of snow events here in town, I always worry about signalization at Washington and 12th, because if all of a sudden you've got stop red light as you come down Washington, there's likelihood that you're going to slide right through that intersection. And so I've always worried about, I'm not convinced that signalization at that location is going to be a big improvement in terms of number of crashes.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, Carl, I had a question.
Sure, John.
So how does this
Commissioner.
affect traffic flow? Will it slow down the flow, say on Washington primarily?
You mean flow meaning the speeds of traffic on
No, I
Washington?
mean it has to stop periodically as it runs through its traffic signals.
Right.
So you're stopping.
Will it
the
operate
traffic.
adequately? Is that the question?
Well, so if you
With the
didn't have to
signal?
stop in the past at 12th,
Right.
but now you have to periodically stop,
Right.
it seems to me that it's going to take longer to get from one end of Washington to the other. And so I don't know what impact that has, if any.
Back them up into the other side.
Well, that's one. Well, I mean, traffic counts are one of the warrants. That's why you typically don't install a traffic signal if you don't have cross-street traffic high enough to warrant a signalization there.
That's part of what the first 2-3 categories are about. Is it reasonable, are you having a volume on the cross street to justify interrupting the main street? It is, and that's what the 8 hour, what that means is 8 hours a day you have enough volume on the side street in order to justify interrupting the main street. That's a tough one to make. I mean, a lot of intersections that people would like to put signals in don't meet that standard. They only meet it 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day. They don't meet it for a long period of time. So that's partly why that warrant's there.
Chair, I have an engineering question.
Would not warrant 6 on your list be talking to the possibility of tying the 7th Street, the future 12th, the 14th, and the 15th Street signals together so that they operated in sequence?
Well, I mean, the coordination makes sense in certain cases, right? I mean, but the warrant, what the warrant's speaking to is when you have a coordinated system in place today, and you're introducing a new intersection, are you going to mess it up, basically? And so in the right spacing, the right condition, yeah, coordination makes sense because then you can get platoons, what we engineers call platoons of cars through without hitting a red, at least for a window of time.
My question is that we're looking at the solution first. Well, maybe not first, but that's all we're looking at right now is one particular solution as to whether or not to put a traffic signal in there. And I'm just wondering if any other considerations had been. You know, I'm not a big fan of traffic signals. That I'd much rather have roundabouts. And there's obviously no room for a roundabout here, but was there any consideration given to putting an island in the middle of that as some sort of a calming device? And could that have a positive
What island do
effect?
you speak of, sir?
That
would allow turns and keep people calm.
Are you going to get a truck through there?
I'm thinking of you and your trucks. No, you're right.
I pull a truck and I pull a fifth wheel trailer.
We need to get trucks through there. I'm just thinking, for example, that island that we have on Glen Oak. I don't know how effective that is, but just to have something in the middle of the road that you have to go around. And
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I mean, John will speak to that.
Well, I think just the recognition that there's not really room for it there for even an island, and I think
well, we do have
truck,
3 lanes there, right?
Yeah, but you've got 3 lanes that are fully utilized, so you've got the center turn lane as well, right?
And if certain vehicles are coming from 12th onto Washington and I'm going to make that left-hand turn, I stop about 4 car lengths back so they can take up that center turn lane to get around the corner.
Yeah.
And 12th is a designated truck route uphill. So if you put an island in there, you'd be affecting their ability.
Is that a bus route?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bus run.
In
I
fact,
want to be careful about designation. We don't have designated truck routes, but it's used by trucks a lot. Yeah. And I think other consider.
I just want to say that isn't maybe.
But your other question about other considerations is a good one, and that's I think where Martin's going to get to. And I don't know if you guys worked out who's going to get to that or not. But
So this is been the flavor of the month. Is what can we do to try and address at least the immediate issues? As Carl mentioned, we won't meet not all of the warrants. We won't meet more than a single warrant until 2017. Now, that helps us because we're getting ready to go into a biennium budget prep process, and we can consider, is this a project that we want to try and put into that budget submittal? So we're working on that internally. When we start prioritizing our CIPs and we take a look at needs and wants, we'll evaluate this one with everything else. What we can do in the short term, and there was some forethought to this when Washington Street was redone, was for the signalization of this intersection. And all of the conduits that need to be run in here for the installation of a pedestrian-activated rapid flashing beacon are already in place. There is an existing control box right here. There's electrical available. We've got an available breaker switch that we could utilize. I have junction boxes at both these locations here in the planter strips, just downstream of the actual crosswalk that we're proposing to protect with it. it would be a relatively simple installation for our teams to go out. We cut our teeth over here at the library installation. We've already met on site with our crews, and we think we can acquire another pedestrian activated flashing beacon this year. We're budgeted for one in this budget cycle, and have it installed after the improvements are completed on Washington Street. 'Cause I'm not going to have my crews and then contractor crews out there, and something goes wrong, and it just turns into pointing fingers. So once they've cleared, the city's accepted the improvements along Washington Street, we'll come in and our teams will do the installation of the PED beacon on the downhill, the north side of Washington Street, protecting this crosswalk. We'll angle the heads so that they're visible both to the north and southbound traffic on Washington, but that also someone coming on 12th, potentially trying to take a left-hand turn, or someone coming on 12th trying to take a right-hand turn here, can see the beacons when a pedestrian activates them. The other thing that we're going to do as a result of this project, there are 2 existing crosswalks, and both of these are striped. We're going to work with our existing contractor, and we're going to request that this stripe not be reinstalled here for this crosswalk at this location, and put some additional signage here requesting that pedestrians cross the street and utilize the protected crosswalk here with the pedestrian activated beacon. Okay, we looked at, well, we could put a barricade here and basically close the crosswalk. There are issues associated with that we don't want to approach. Plus, then when we go in to signalize it, we have the ability to just restripe this and utilize it again as crosswalk on both sides of the road.
Isn't the curb on this side steeper, taller?
All of these curbs, at the end of this project, all of these curbs will be ADA compliant. So the only one that was not fully ADA compliant was this one here on the southwest corner, and that was fully reconstructed as part of the project this summer.
Questions are great.
Okay.
Quick question. So then in 3 years, if traffic signals go in there, traffic lights, are you able to recycle the...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will reduce, reuse, recycle. And we're already thinking, where would we potentially put it at? So one of the things I'm going to give you at the staff report are some improvements that we implemented within the city during the summer in conjunction with some efforts with one of the local schools and their Safe Routes to School program. And we've got several locations, several needs that we could reuse that for.
Not to be
Yes, William.
more obstreperous than usual, but what could I say to talk you out of putting that pedestrian activated crosswalk there? The reason that I would ask that question.
Okay. Well, don't convince me.
Okay.
Convince this committee. That's why we're presenting this to
Okay.
you guys.
My suggestion is that that's probably not the most effective use of our money. For the main reason is the biggest problem that I see with traffic there is traffic coming up 12th Street at that very steep intersection to come there and then turning and looking down there. It's not the pedestrians that are having difficulties. It's the traffic coming up 12th Street and trying to, or even coming down 12th Street and trying to turn onto Washington, that is far more dangerous. And I think the crash data is more significant than any pedestrians being hit. So I'm not sure that I would want to invest money into a crosswalk, a pedestrian activated crosswalk signal there when it's just going to be a couple more years when we're probably going to need to put in a traffic signal there anyway. So I'm just going to suggest to this committee that we might not consider recommending that. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of the one up here on 7th Street. I've seen too many people, too many pedestrians crossing on the other side. They don't want to walk across Adams Street. They don't want to walk across John Adams and go up there and push the button. They'd rather take their chance and get across and go between the cafe and the fire station. I'm just not sure that that's an effective use of our money.
What's the cost of a pedestrian signal? What's the cost of a traffic signal?
Well,
Pedestrian signal, for the one we're looking at, it's priced at $7,200. And again, it's reusable at any location that we choose to redeploy.
After using the signal at the library and for years not having it, I can say with some assurity that it creates traffic breaks to allow the people on the side streets to get into the traffic flow.
For the traffic, not for the pedestrians. Yeah.
Well, when the traffic on 7th Street stops, the cars that are waiting to turn on John Adams have an opportunity to turn while that light is blinking and the pedestrian is crossing. Also, I can say that it's a far better installation right now than it was before, because now we can get across the street where before we could not possibly. My only problem with that whole installation is that you move the dancing couple down to the other intersection, and I wish he was nowhere near an active roadway.
Is it about $300,000 for a traffic light?
It's expensive. I could not give you Carl could probably give you a better idea as to what we're looking at.
Ballpark say 200 to 250.
Yeah.
For a small intersection like that, the mast arms are pretty
And about
short.
about 9 months to a year for installation.
It'd be pretty quick if it's usually the poles would take a long time to fabricate and transport and that kind of thing.
Fortunately, the rest of the infrastructure's in place. It's
Yeah.
we'd have to put the poles in. That would cut some time and be the lion's share of the expense.
And getting the control boards through the environmental chamber at the state.
Well, I've got several issues here. Number one is, it seems like we're addressing a pedestrian issue, and is that really the biggest problem there, or is it vehicle issues? Also, I think it would be safer if you put the pedestrian crossing on the southern intersection.
There are too many site obstructions associated with power poles and other utilities there that would prevent the installation on that side. What we originally looked at were 4 beacons, one at each corner, and timing them together and having them intertie so that whichever way you were going, the signals would block for that respective crosswalk that you were trying to make.
So if the traffic is coming up Washington Street from the north, up that steep hill, how much sight distance do they have when they from the crest of Washington to that?
We actually
crosswalk?
measured that, and the top of the beacons sit at about 7.5 to 8 feet, and it was just rudimentary. We walked down the hill and said, okay, this is where I can see, and from there we wheeled it out, and you can actually see the top of the beacon before you hit the crest.
Okay. My question still is this a pedestrian issue here or a traffic issue?
To speak to that, the police department was one of the major advocates for you guys need to do something, because this is the highest incident pedestrian accident location that we have in the city.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Actually,
my question.
Yeah, actually, the intersection is it's got vehicle accidents there pretty high as well. I think it was the city owns this signal, whereas we've got other intersections where the county or the state are responsible for. This is an intersection that the city's responsible for, and it's got the most dangerous signalized intersection we have. So we need to do something. The question about pedestrians, well, we've got 2 pedestrian accidents there, 1 fatality. Father's Heart is on this corner as well, and they've generated a fair amount of foot traffic just getting to and from that location. And so it's definitely something that we're more aware of now than we ever have been. And but given the conduits and that are in exist, it'd be different if we had to go doing what we did at 5th and 7th and John Adams. But given the infrastructure's there, given that we budgeted for a ped-activated crosswalk, I don't know, William, if you have other priorities that you had in mind. Obviously, we've heard some tonight, but I think given kind of our or input from the PD or input from the property owners down there, we
No, that's changed my mind.
kind of moving in that direction.
Quick question, Mr. Chairman. So, what are you looking for here? There's a report. Do you want the committee to make a recommendation supporting the report's conclusions, or what?
I think the report doesn't really speak to the pedestrian activated signal. The report is what the report is, and I think it'd be nice to have a motion that says, we'd like the city to continue to look towards warrants for signalization, but in the interim, we support the idea of a pedestrian activated
So moved.
rapid, something like that.
I will second that motion.
Done.
Okay.
All in favor?
Did you get that?
Well, you have some
Aye.
discussion.
Could we have the motion
Yeah.
repeated? I didn't catch it.
The only question I have, John, if, let's say there's ice and snow, can you turn those lights on to be coming down Washington Street, be amber flashers?
Street lights?
Yeah. So if you come down that hill, you won't be able to stop at that.
The signal is amber. It's all amber. So the pedestrian still needs to
No, but
use
I'm
He's
caution.
talking when we signalize.
The traffic
If you signalize it,
Oh.
if you have an ice and snow
You
coming
can't.
down
There's no.
or going up, you'd rather not stop.
A traffic tech can set that sucker to anything he wants.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because when the state of Oregon
Well,
was running all
the
these.
traffic tech may be able to do that, and the computer may be able to do that, but if it's not a standard by which that's
Right.
used across the region, we won't do that.
Because when the state of Oregon used to run those streets, when there was ice and snow, they all flashed. So the cars didn't have to stop going up the hill.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion on the floor.
Motion on the floor. You got something to,
I wanted to have the motion repeated, so I
Oh,
understand what
that,
it is.
that the TAC would recommend that Public Works continue to monitor for warrants for traffic signalization at the intersection of 12th and Washington, and in the interim that we make plans for getting a pedestrian activated
Activated rapid flashing beacon. I know
rapid
it's a
flashing
mouthful.
beacon, blah, blah, blah.
and Mr. Anderson seconded.
Yes.
Any more further question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Thanks, Carl.
That was easy.
Thank you, Carl.
Chances are good.
We'll see you back out here for Partlow and South End.
There you go.
All right.
Looks like, what are we, are at staff reports? Myers Road, Myers Road.
What are we at?
Oh. Which is
Just some
5B.
updates of some of the work that we've done this summer. Alicia, do you want to bring up those photographs? So, if you recall, we had gotten some requests for some improvements in the Myers Road area in conjunction with Gaffney Lane and some of the efforts they're doing with Safe Routes to School. If you hadn't noticed, you haven't made it out that way. The crosswalk, we did analysis. It didn't meet the full warrants for a crosswalk. But then we worked with the school and we got locations for where our students living, and is the fact that there is not a crosswalk preventing them from walking to school, and there were enough children living in the vicinity that our rationale was if there was a safe crosswalk for them to utilize, we could potentially increase the number of people crossing at that location. So we went through and installed a crosswalk, did all the excuse me, allergy issues today. Installed all the advance warning and put in a new crosswalk there at Myers and Gaffney Lane. I'm sorry, Squire and Myers. And the resident who requested it, we've been communicating with her, and she's very pleased with it. So she asked us to thank the Transportation Advisory Committee, so that's why we brought it to you. Okay. Additionally, we expanded some shoulder that she'd brought to our attention where there was not any existing shoulder for a bike lane, let alone enough shoulder to allow someone to walk through. So during the summer, we had the crew lay about 100 feet of new shoulder at Gaffney and Myers, which we had a photo, but it's not a big deal. I think you've got the same photo.
It's in the packet.
Is it?
It's in the packet.
Okay. You can see it there, but just some improvements that we worked on. And we're looking at some additional things that we can do internally this upcoming summer to, again, support that Safe Routes to School program at that school. We talked to you guys about this earlier last year. We're trying to use that school as a model program so that the other schools get on board, start working with us in the state to initiate a Safe Routes to School program. I think we're having some good success.
Point of information, How much maintenance do those crosswalks require in terms of,
More than people realize. It's the thermoplastic we'll get 2 seasons maybe out of a fresh lay, but then after that it's usually at least once a season. Maybe you can get by with 2 seasons before you have to relay the thermoplastic.
How much?
It depends on the crosswalk.
Let's say like the
Yeah,
one,
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, and I hate to just
per
guess at a
stripe.
number. I can pull up the work order and tell you to the dollar as what it costs us in terms of materials and time. But I'd have to pull that work order up.
We'll pull that for you next time. But between the signage and the crosswalk, I think there's also pedestrian crossing ahead signage included.
Yeah, that's
So-
the advisory signage
so
on
there's
both ends.
There's advisory signage on either end, right, that tells you that there's pedestrian crosswalk, and then there's the signage at the crosswalk, and then there's the thermoplastic. Although I would say our crews have gotten better. If you notice, most of the traffic shouldn't be driving over the white line. So if you ever come to these, I always try to avoid them just so I'm not impacting them.
Put
So
some
if
bolts on it.
What's the average
Stay off the
lifespan?
paint.
Studded tires are hell on these.
Yeah.
Jan and Shane, which are our thermo crew for the summer, did an excellent job this summer with getting our thermo relayed, and they're doing a really good job of keeping these maintained. It's one of our big summer project jobs.
do they have any calming effect, do you think, at all? I know when I approach one,
I think they do.
I'm looking both
I think
ways.
they do. I mean, I think most people are. It's kind of like the guidance signage on speed. Most people, when they see it, they slow down because they need those reminders.
You know what I'm looking for at these things? I'm looking for kids with things in their ears, walking, with their eyes going like this,
Yeah.
or they're texting.
That's why we're required on this. I believe the advisory sign is 250 feet forward of the actual crossing, and that's based on the posted speed limit for the road. And that tells the approaching driver you're coming up to a posted crosswalk. And I think John's alluded to it. I catch myself doing it when I see those. You tend to slow down. You'll take your foot off the gas. I may not necessarily apply the brake, but you'll take your foot off the gas subconsciously and keep an eye out, see if there's someone coming.
Oncoming cars don't concern me anymore as pedestrian.
Yep.
Boy, oh boy, it just makes me nervous.
One thing that I would say about signage, that sign right there is fairly effective, especially on Myers Road, because there's not a lot of signage. If you get in the neighborhood and you start cluttering it up with signage,
Absolutely.
it's
visual
effective
overload.
for just a short period of time, and then pretty soon people forget about it, and it's just yet another piece of
Junk.
visual
Garbage.
distraction.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with signage. I mean, people. Well, for one,
How long
there's
do you
a lot
think
of
it'll
people,
take before
like
that
those
sign
people
is
on
run
7th
over?
that don't want to use the crosswalk. I kind of feel like there's people that just say, "I'm not going to comply with government. I'm not going to use the sign. I'm going to avoid it." Same thing.
Why
with-
should I walk across the street to do something safe?
Yeah. So I mean, there is some
Yeah.
science to signage. There can be some.
And there's some psychology to it, too.
Right.
How people think if they do it all,
Yeah.
really.
I think those little rider signs that go underneath them are really pretty
Yeah.
effective.
I like those. And those were a secondary installation at the request of the citizens saying, "Oh, could we get those?" And we said, "Yeah, we can put those in." So. All right, so the next update I've got for you is Beaver Creek Maple Lane. This is an installation location for one of the flashing yellow arrows that we had installed last year. When we installed those, we knew there was going to be a certain burn-in period where people had to become accustomed to it. For this particular location, compared to the other, I think it's 12 locations that had the FYAs put in there, this one had a higher traffic incident rate associated with it than any of the other locations. And this was brought to our attention by our traffic officer, Brian Willard, and his team over there, Greg. And they came to us and said, listen, overall these FYAs are turning out to be effective, but we've got a concern for this location. So it's beyond my capability and something that we contract with the county to help us with. And it's a good instance of us partnering with our partners over at County Transportation and saying, we want to do a traffic analysis at this and determine what needs to be done. because what we've done with this modification is not safe. So they've taken a look at it. They were prepared a very extensive report that I believe we included in your packet. And we've totally made some modifications to the operation periods on that FYA to minimize those traffic incidences based on the data that we had available from the police reports. So it's 3 different agencies or 3 different groups working together to try and improve an incident that was brought to our attention. And we wanted to make you guys aware of it because that's what the focus of this group is for. So take a look at the report. Christian did a really good job of laying out what the issues were and what the potential solutions are. We're keeping an eye on this location in particular, but all of the FYAs, if we start getting any incidences that are associated with that particular turn pattern or that signalization pattern, that we'll be going through the same steps. But I think it was a great example of cooperation. And that's all I have. So resolution 1416.
I think we were going to do a little update on construction projects.
Oh, yeah.
So for the most part, our slurry seal work is done. Our chip seal work is done. The county did a chip seal project for us on South End and Gaffney Lane, and they're both striped and essentially complete. Our paving projects have been moving forward with a fair amount of positive results and on schedule, in budget. They worked a lot on Washington Street today. They've been on Washington Street quite a bit. There was a lot of stormwater work that was associated with that project. Our water crew did some water work on that, but the finished product is essentially going in today, or went in today, along the top 2 blocks, which is from 5th to Washington. We've still got to stripe it, but then they're going to start working their way down the hill with paving, and we've still got 9th to rebuild. So 9th between Washington and John Adams, we've got a lot of work to do there. And Holcomb, for your information, between the bridge and Redland Road is scheduled to start. I think they're even going to start that yet this week. Mm-hmm. So trying to think if there's other.
Was it Jackson? Or was that last year?
Say that again.
Jackson?
Jackson was this year. They're finished with Jackson. They finished Sharman and I think East Street. So yeah, they're nice. We've done a lot of. They look better. They drive better.
Boy,
now there's going to be speeding issues, I'm sure. But
that Sharman is a good job.
Yeah, they did a good job with that.
You went pretty deep with a lot of pavement on Jackson in a couple of places.
We had to dig out a lot of Jackson. Again, the storm drainage there is kind of weird, where there's catch basins on the uphill side of the intersection, but not on the downhill side. So every intersection we had to structurally rebuild the roadway, just because once we opened it up, the trucks got on it, it started. You could see there was structural failure there, so we had to dig those out. So we did a lot more on Jackson. We had planned for a lot more on Washington. It turned out we didn't need to do it on Washington. So we're hoping there's kind of a wash there in quantities so that we don't get hit for much in the way of additional cost. But those projects are moving forward. The only other big project that I can think of is out on 99E, and that seems to be moving forward as well.
When did you say Washington is expected to be done?
Well, I think they're going to be done with the paving this week.
Oh,
striping's gonna linger.
On Jackson, where you had the 2 crosswalks by the old high school.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to still put those 2 in there, right?
Yeah, in fact we put in the ADA ramps for that. So
I would like to see some way where they wouldn't allow the school buses to park between those 2 crosswalks, because if you're coming down let's say going north, and somebody's coming out in front of a bus, and with kids you don't see them until you're right there, and it says no parking, and there's a fire hydrant, but they still park there.
Maybe
they could go down.
Maybe you could work with
They could go down on the other side, because leave that open area so we can see as drivers. I know it's there. I slow down because I never know when it's, because it's a preschool in there, and mothers drop their older kids off, and the younger kids are just tearing to get back to the car.
Well, Martin's been working pretty closely with the school district at Gaffney School and some of the busing needs that they had, and we've got some crosswalk work there. So that'd be easy conversation.
See, that's
to have.
not all.
I didn't know that problem
That's not all
existed.
Oregon City. The ESD, and there's North Clackamas School District is in there, and I see West Lynn in there. I see Gladstone in there.
Oh, okay.
They all don't, got to
Well,
get
we
the point
can-
across.
We can.
Well, we are having a conversation with our operations manager regarding some other busing issues, and I will add it to my agenda for our meeting.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Okay.
So let's see,
Try
Lisa, do we want to talk about just a reminder to the viewing audience and our members here
Reminder for
about the membership?
the vacancies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there will be 3 vacancies. You have 3 members, PAC members who terms expire
Is your
December
mic on?
31st.
Your mic.
mic
Use your
on?
microphone on.
Yeah,
Your red light.
yeah, it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then just speak up.
Okay, so there will be 3 vacancies then when the terms, 3 individuals' terms end December 31st.
Who are they?
It's Blaine Meyer, and then Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Gifford.
And maybe him.
What's that? And yeah. Right.
And the new mayor.
Wood is under here.
And there's nothing preventing you from applying again. You can
Yes.
sit on this committee for.
Yeah.
And John, regarding your question, if we can find your old application and you sign it with the current date.
Yeah, that'd be super.
Yeah, we can do
Yeah,
that.
don't make it
Make it simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do need you to, we'll make a copy, white it out, and re-sign with the
Sure.
current date on there.
Yeah, and like I think I had emailed you. We can get that from the city manager's office. His assistant said she can get that for us.
Do we
So
have
just-
a vacancy right now?
No, you will. Terms will end December
Oh, I
31st, so
see.
you will have 3 then.
So if you just call me, I'll stop by then. You can stop by Martin's office or whatever.
We can scan it and send it to your email address, and then you can just sign
Sure,
it.
you could do that too.
Save you a trip. Because Center Street is dicey.
Do we have any communications that says TriMet bus Route 33 and 99 schedule updates?
That was an informational item, wasn't
That's
it?
just informational.
Information, okay.
Yeah, you'll have the schedules
In the packet?
in your packet.
I didn't
The
get a
compa-
packet
okay.
this time, so.
Okay, I have extras for you,
Okay.
but there's a comparison as to what the schedule used to look like and what it looks like now.
I stopped my mail service and restarted it, so
Okay.
I was out of town. So.
There was one.
Schedule.
Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah.
Going,
There's 2 more items. They wanted
Okay.
to discuss the Clackamas County traffic safety.
future item or President?
I have a couple.
Going back to Center Street
Mm-hmm.
and my knocking on doors, I had 3 people within 2 blocks complain about the alleys and their conditions. And I wonder if the city, is that the city responsibility, those alleys?
To some degree, well, they're public rights of way, so I would say yes.
Okay, because some of them, they showed me, I mean, I wouldn't dare drive my car
Yeah.
through them because of the huge swells and ruts.
How about the brushing?
So some of them are brushing. No, our responsibility in the past has been with just the surface. Some of them got paved over the years. Some of them are gravel. The gravel ones are something we do from time to time. Go in and, especially if with our millings, we've done some repair work and restoration work there. The entrance, the sidewalk entrance, for instance, to an alley. We've got a small amount of sidewalk budget. That's typically what we spend that budget on, is replacing those that are trip hazards. Paving alleys is not. We don't. We're likely to move from a paved surface to gravel. Now we'll allow the residents that live along the alley, if they came to us with a paving project that they wanted to do, we'd allow for that. But we don't we don't have the funding to maintain our streets, let alone our alleyways.
Well, I
So-
kind of
But
thought
this
that
is-
might be the answer. My take on that, if I was a resident, was I would rather have you come in and add compacted gravel over asphalt than put up with the current conditions. Because this one particular one I looked at, the rut must have been 8 to 10 inches deep. And you can imagine what that would do to the pan of a lot of modern low-slung cars. This one fellow told me that he has to come from the other direction rather than direction from his house in order to get to his garage safely. So I don't know if you have any organized plan to check those out, or it's a responsive complaints from the
We're
homeowners.
complaint driven for that. And I would say, I mean, I don't know how much experience Martin actually has with that. And that's why I kind of answered that question. But my experience, our past is, yeah, we're complaint driven. We deal with those usually in the wintertime, not necessarily summertime, because we're busy with paving. So those are great wintertime projects for us.
Bob, what we have done is when we have gotten requests for those, and we've got several of them from some residents in Kanema. And what we did is a compromise with them where we provided millings, which we've got plenty of millings. We said, I'll drop off, a 2 yard of some millings and let you guys spread it out. And as long as you're not looking for it to be compacted in place, it'll fill most of your potholes. And that's worked out pretty well for a couple of the residents down there, and it made them pretty happy. We can do something similar to that with residents there as a short term. The millings, are not going to last beyond a few seasons, maybe one season, but it'll give you a drivable surface for that period.
Yeah.
And it's an easy fix. We'll just, next time especially because we're getting a milling machine, we can bring the millings and drop them off where needed. And
Well, that was
resident
just the first time I've been
compromise.
confronted with that. I didn't know it existed even, and
Yeah,
it's pretty dramatic.
And one thing, not all of the alleyways are maintained. So there are some portions of the alleyways, they may still be marked as right-of-way, but they come to a point where they're designated as unimproved right-of-way, and that's where we stop. Because we're not going to be going and improving unimproved right-of-way and laying in new surface that was never there. Which is one of the things that Paul referred to as like, oh, they only clear the brush out to a certain point. Like, we clear the brush out to where the right-of-way meets the unimproved right-of-way, and that's where we stopped.
But is it up to the property owner to maintain the brush on the right-of-way? Because I don't have one, but up the street from me, the guy's got its laurel and everything. It's right to the edge of the pavement now.
It's frontage, it's alley frontage, but it's still frontage, just like a lawn or a planter strip. It's the expectation that they would maintain that. I wish we had the funding to maintain all those kinds of facilities, but we don't.
I met one real interesting family up there on Center Street. She was bragging about her short commute to work.
Yeah. I wish I had that commute.
Future agenda items.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I think that the city may be able to do something about, and one maybe not. And maybe it has to do with the frontage brush. But I guess it was Leland. I was going on Leland up where it comes into Meyer and then turns into Leland again. But the trees hanging over the stop sign, you couldn't even see the stop sign.
We'll clear side obstructions to stop signs.
Yeah, that was a particularly hazardous thing.
Do you know exactly where this was, William? Do you want to send me an email?
Leland, Myers.
I'll send you an email. Yeah,
Send
I
me
think
an
it was
email,
like
I can
Leland
make
and
sure
Myers.
it gets hit the right location.
Sure. I should have taken a picture of it, but it was at night, and it was even darker. I mean, with a tree in front of at night, there was no way that if I didn't know the neighborhood, I would never have realized that there was a sign there.
We'll look at the stop signs at Leland and Myers. If it's in that intersection,
Okay,
that's
thanks.
pretty easy to find.
The other one, I don't know if we can do anything about it, but just in the last probably 3 weeks, I've noticed 3 U-turns in the middle of 213 going up the hill before they get to whatever that street is.
Beaver Creek?
No. Oh, wait, at the bottom of the hill. at the
Redland?
bottom of the hill, Redland Road.
Redland.
Right, at Redland Road. They're coming, they realize, oh, now the jug handle's in there, they can't turn left anymore, and they
Yeah.
realize they're going the wrong way, and they don't want to go all the way up the hill. And
Well, if
so,
you just make a right and go back.
yeah, they could make a right and go back around, but they don't. And I saw one car that was actually headed away from the, going up the hill before the light, and he was stopped in the lane. It's not a left turn lane. There's no place to turn left there. He was stopped in that lane. All the traffic was backed up behind him, and he was waiting for a safe break in the traffic that was screaming down the hill at him to make a U-turn there. And I don't know what we can do about that, but like I said, that was 3 occurrences that I saw in the last couple of weeks of people making U-turns on 213.
That's been happening ever since the jug handle was put in.
Yeah.
One of the things
I'll
I
talk
know-
to our partners at ODOT.
One of the things I noticed about that location is that if you're coming southbound on 205, whipping around the loop, and you want to come into Prairie Schooner Way in Washington, there are times when you cannot get into that lane to make that turn. The alternative, of course, is to go up to Redland Road and come in double back on Abernathy. But it, say, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it can be very difficult to get into that lane from, if you're coming down the 205 and going around. I do
Mr.
have
Ryan.
something for future agendas.
Go ahead.
I've been kind of looking in on the 2 park master plans that the city's got going, and I think that if we could get a presentation from Scott Archer on especially the Glen Oak Park, that I think it would be beneficial to us, because I think there's some things that'll be developed in there that may add to the confusion about the school and the Glen Oak Road and all.
Chairman, I have one quick follow-up as well. You had mentioned you haven't paved the Holcomb there as it comes into Redland Road. And some time ago, we had asked about the alignment of the traffic lights. Is that going to be fixed with this?
There will be a dedicated, the far right lane will be right turn only. The center lane will become a through lane, and then the left is it left and
turn.
through or just
Left only.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
the
the
lights
signals will be realigned to match.
realigned with, yeah, okay, great, thanks.
Anything else to put on? It's almost 8 o'clock. I want to close it. Go for it.
Just sorry. There's 2 quick items.
Sure.
One from the city recorder. She wants you guys to know that the laptop is no longer out here due to security reasons. And so that it must be kept back here with us. So if you or anyone else who wants to provide us information to put on the projector moving forward needs to email it to me, and then I will get it ready for you guys.
Looks
And this-
cleaner anyway.
And the second was something that you had mentioned at a meeting, Clackamas County Traffic Safety Commission, to kind of plant the seed if any of you are interested in trying to volunteer on Clackamas County's version of the attack, and maybe some sort of dual involvement, so that way there's more communication between the two. I don't know if you wanted to say anything more to that, or if that's
Well,
basically
just
it.
that I think it would be a good idea for one of our members to join that committee, because, they're working on a lot of the same issues.
And all their roads, a lot of the roads spoke into us.
Yeah, I would volunteer myself, but I've got other things going, so I don't think I can do that just at this point in time.
And I have said that I will make sure I'm up on any vacancies, and then I can notify you guys when they have vacancies come available on that commission.
One thing to piggyback on what Lisa mentioned earlier about the presentations, please try and email them to her. One of the things that we're trying to be cognizant of is security of our network. And we're not supposed to be hooking thumb drives up to our network that don't belong to staff. There is concern potentially bringing a virus or something that could get into the city's network and then causing a major issue for us. So that's why they're asking that you get the presentations in ahead of time. Email allows it to get scanned on the way in, and then it's pretty safe to bring up from the network that way.
Anything else? We're adjourned.